And our next speaker is our juror, Erika Dueck. Erika is a visual artist from Manitoba who finished her BFA honors at the U of M in 2013 and completed her MFA at the University of Guelph in 2016. Her work has received several awards, including the national winner of the Bank of Montreal First Art Invitational Student Art Competition, and she was longlisted for Aesthetica, the Art and Culture magazine's art prize, and she received recognition as one of 11 winners in the UNESCO Chair in Bioethics and Human Rights Global Art competition. She's had the opportunity to exhibit her work across Canada in Winnipeg, Montreal, and Toronto, as well as globally, from Texas to New York and Rome. I think that's my introduction for Erika.
All right, so I'm Erika Dueck. And before I talk about myself and my art practice, I wanted to first of all say how honored I was to be able to listen into the awards ceremony evening the other day and hear all the winning artists discussing their work. Hearing about the conceptual motivations that inspired your artworks was particularly interesting since Derek and I had spent so much time viewing the work, but didn't have accompanying artist statements. And I really, really appreciated that. It was clear from hearing everyone talking about their work, the level of dedication, passion, and thoughtfulness that went into the submissions. And I'm sure that's true of all the artists who participated, not just those who won awards. So thank you for participating and investing so much of yourself into each artwork. It was great to see such a variety of interests and approaches. And I'm sure Derek and I could both say we look forward to seeing your work in the future in other shows and competitions as it continues to develop. After listening to Derek's talk, I'm going to say we're in for a completely different ride, but it was really nice to see some of the things that he touched on, because I think there will end up being some overlap, although completely different. So if at the end of this you go, there was no overlap, don't worry about it. But if you go, oh, that was interesting, there's some connections, that's great too. Anyway, so I'm going to start by telling you a bit about myself. And then we'll look at my art practice, and depending on the timing, I might talk a little bit about my jurors' comments at the end in relation to my teaching at the U of M or not. We'll see how much time. It's a bit fluid here with me. So first of all, I was born and raised in Manitoba, actually in Niverville, so just south of Winnipeg. And I still live in rural Manitoba, so now I'm just living even farther south in St. Pierre. I did my bachelor's with honors at the School of Art in U of M, at the U of M, and then I completed my master's at the University of Guelph in 2016. I've been a sessional instructor at the University of Manitoba since the winter of 2017, although this year I'm on maternity leave. You may have seen the little babe I was holding for a while. He was 5 months yesterday, so it's been a whirlwind since the summer, being a first-time parent, and of course I can't just do that. I've been redoing plumbing in our house and shingling a shed and putting up siding, what many first-time parents do at the same time. Nonsense. Anyway, it's been fun. So I teach at the U of M as a sessional, and I've also taught in Guelph as a sessional while I was completing my master's. I teach a variety of courses, from drawing, sculpture, digital essentials, where they're learning the Adobe programs, printmaking. I teach some art history and mixed media courses. So there's a lot of variety in the courses that I teach. And Anyway, in terms of my art practice, I'm known for making sculptures that are miniatures. But I'm not actually going to start off my PowerPoint presentation showing you my miniatures. Instead, I'm going to start at the beginning. So often in artist talks, you'll see the artist's more professional developed work, but you might not be able to see how they began. Since the purpose for the Manitoba Society of Artists is to encourage artwork from emerging and professional artists, which means they're showcasing artists at various points in their own artistic journeys, I thought it might be interesting to show you my own progression from the time I started my BFA through my master's and then to my current work. Hopefully, it will be an encouragement to see one example of how an artist's practice can expand and change over the years, and maybe it will inspire you to move towards new challenges within your own work. So anyway, we'll look at some images now. I'm going to go to share screen. Oh, here we go, share. I just want to say to everyone before I actually get going, if you have questions during the talk at any point, just type it in the chat and I can answer. I won't get thrown off track. So feel free to interrupt me or say that doesn't make sense or tell us more or whatever. Anyway, so starting at the beginning. In my first years of my bachelor's program, I often worked on ideas based on my own personal experiences and cultural history. So this work, for example, is about my Russian Mennonite ancestors who had to flee to Canada. In these first year projects, I was being exposed to using simple materials and learning how to transform and manipulate them, which became really important to me. I still use simple, accessible materials, and working off of personal histories has ended up being a very good way of stimulating ideas. Although in this competition, you were not required to include an artist statement about the conceptual motivations of your artwork. That's something I'm often encouraging my students to look to for their own inspiration, because it can be difficult moving from creating just a beautiful image to creating artwork with some sort of discussion or idea or that extra something behind the artwork. This is something I tell my students, everyone's lives and stories are so unique, and drawing inspiration from those sources often creates perspectives and artworks that move away from generic approaches. So if you're ever having trouble thinking about how to develop that side of your work, that's a good place to start. That's when you start seeing things that you haven't seen before, and you get the artist's voice coming through in interesting ways, rather than seeing, a Google image that we've seen so many times before. Once again, this is another first year artwork that I did. This one was about my mom's experience. She had twins before I was born that passed away. So it was her first pregnancy. And once again, it was exploring personal familial history using simple, accessible materials, rubber gloves, black ballpoint pen, and then the torn paper with India ink, and then some, I can't remember what it's called, but a medium just to stiffen the paper in that form. Anyway, this was also one of my first artworks to win an award, and it had an opportunity to show internationally as part of the UNESCO Chair in Bioethics and Human Rights Global Art Competition. That was, first of all, a really big encouragement for me, of course, because there's a sense that you're on the right track when you get an award for an artwork, but even so, I would recommend everyone, as you have done with this show, to take every opportunity to apply for competitions and shows as often as you can. You never know when you'll be accepted. And often, like in this case, it was just a student work. It's easy to discount it and go like, I don't even know what this thing is. It's rubber gloves, it's strange. And with your own work, you start to look at it so long and you go, this is terrible. Maybe I shouldn't apply. Just apply. You never know when something will be accepted. And even the process of applying for shows and awards is a good practice to get into, even though there's rejection. It's a good practice getting accepted, accepting rejection and kind of hardening yourself to that and being like, next time. Anyway, but yeah, don't think your work is not good enough. Keep doing it. And the more you do it, the better you'll become. And one thing I would recommend is a good place to look for opportunities for group shows is Akimbo. So AKIMBO. Akimbo. Anyway, that's a Canadian website, and I always tell my students to look at it. They can find opportunities. So anyway, next one. Initially, when I went to art school, I thought I was going to do graphic design. I thought that would be practical and I'd be able to, have a job at the end of things. So I did a bunch of graphic design courses. This was one of my favorite projects from one of the courses. It's a zine project. So it's a humorous take on a magazine for the traditional Mennonite girls. Once again, thinking about my personal history, but it's, a little bit, there's humor. As I was working in graphic design, I realized I hated it though. I hated working with computers so much, it drove me crazy. Although I do work with computers, I did not like doing all of my artwork on a screen. I found it limiting. And one of the reasons I ended up liking this project the most is because it looks handmade. Even though I made it on the computer, I tried to make it look as, it has that kind of quality to it, that it's been cut and pasted and handled and torn and worn. And that's what I really wanted to do, make things with my hands and manipulate materials. So graphic design was restrictive and I thought, no more of these courses. I can't take it anymore. And so then I moved over and started, surprisingly, doing photography, which doesn't seem like it's hands-on at all at first glance. However, I found that there was a lot more room to play. So although the final product is just this image and this scene, you get to create that whole scene. And so you're playing with lighting, costumes, composition, in this case, movement. I was actually dancing within this scene and taking images with different lengths of exposure to capture that movement. And I'm an incredibly slow worker. I always think every time I start a new artwork, I say to myself, I'm going to be so fast. This is going to be so great. I'm going to start it. I'm going to get it done. It's going to be amazing. And then like hundreds of hours into it, I'm like, what am I doing? I'm never going to finish. This is taking forever. And so photography has a certain amount of immediacy. I can set up a scene, get everything going. And then within that scene, within that space, I can take a lot of different images and experiment within that scene. So there was something with photography, that the immediacy, that I really enjoyed. Derek talked about projectors. I was actually I started playing with the projector as a light source for imagery. So I was projecting different images onto the figure, and then seeing how it began to merge two images together. It almost begins to confound the two spaces. So it begins to be, it's difficult to see what is there, what's not there, as you're sorting out those two spaces. This is very different from my current work, but like I said, photography helped me learn a lot about lighting spaces, how to create drama, tension, focus, and all of those aspects have come into my practice as I make these miniature sculptures. So I think that's one of the encouraging things about experimenting with different kinds of mediums and artworks and ideas. It may seem completely left field, but it's building all sorts of skills and ideas and techniques that starts coming into your work in other ways that you couldn't have anticipated initially. Yeah. While working in mostly photography courses, I also was doing some printmaking courses. So once again, I'm working mostly in two-dimensional mediums throughout my undergrad. I really enjoyed creating images, but one of my profs kept asking me why I was focusing on photography, because she said, Erika, you shouldn't be doing photography and 2D mediums. You are a maker. I had no idea what she was talking about. I was like, what do you mean? I am making things. No, you're a maker. You need to be making things with your hands. I thought, this is with my hands. I am drawing. I am creating these scenes within photography, but I think she was onto something. There was something else that my hands wanted to be doing that I couldn't identify at that point. And she had also said, not everyone can make things with their hands. Anyway, so as a result of that, I did take a ceramics course at school. So this image, I don't know how clear it is on your screens, but there is a face within this image. So there's kind of like two eye sockets, a little nose right here, and lips. So I did take a ceramics course and started playing more sculpturally. But once again, I did not like ceramics. And that's because the medium I found incredibly stressful. I am a slow worker, and the problem with ceramics is you can make something, you can put it on the shelf, and then maybe it didn't dry properly, and you come back to it and it's wrecked itself all by itself. And my emotional state, it was too risky. It goes in the kiln and it comes out exploded or something. And I thought, I can't handle it. I'm so slow. If I leave this artwork, it better stay the same way when I come back. I can't do it. So anyway, but it was nice to start working with my hands in a different way. And there are sometimes I think, maybe I do want to do something in ceramics, but then I don't know. Anyway, but let's keep moving. So I continue taking photographs, and this one looks totally different than the other images. That is me. I don't know if you can tell, in costume and heavily altered afterwards. So in this case, I was thinking about these shows on television, like the Real Housewives of New Jersey or wherever, and these ideals of the perfect housewife, the perfect woman, model beauty. Anyway, so I dressed up in costume. I tried to make myself look like these women, and then when I saw the photos, I was like, not even close. I need to make more alterations. So I did more and more and more editing, and I made my fake nails even longer. I made my fake lashes even longer. I made some parts bigger, some parts smaller, very altered. And then I thought, this photo does not have enough. It needs to be more, like on the surface of the print. And so I can't just present a photo. So I started, paper toll is an old craft technique that you may be aware of. But I started printing out multiple images and then cutting them out and layering them. So over here, you can see that depending on the thickness of what I'm showing, like this little liqueur glass is one level higher than the Mona Lisa picture. But then my body kind of really gets three-dimensional in this area, whereas other areas are set a little farther back. So all the flowers, this was all photographed, but then cut out and layered. And I think the actual, like the thickest part of the image is in the corners where the flowers are the thickest. And it's probably almost 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches thick. So yeah, all of this paper cutting actually does relate to my current practice, although the ideas and imagery is completely different than what I'm doing now. But once again, I was working with a 2-dimensional medium, but wanting to somehow make it 3-dimensional. So that impetus, that desire was still there and was still pushing me to work in these ways. And once again, also using craft techniques. And this whole idea, I don't know how important this is to mention, but actually came to me because we went on an art trip for school to New York, and I went to one gallery and they had a little side room with some old photographs in a little room. I don't think they weren't even part of the main show. They just belonged to the, I don't know, the history of the gallery. Anyway, there were some stains and scratches on the surface of that print. And I didn't even care what the image was, but I just was like, wow, look at the surface of the print. Look at the materiality. Oh, I love that. I just want to do something with the materiality of the print. And from just seeing stains and scratches, it made me turn to cutting paper excessively for months to finish this work. Okay, anyway. That leads me to my final year of the bachelor's program. So I was considering applying to a Master of Landscape Architecture program, which I did end up applying to, and I did finish 1 year, but that's another story. Anyways, I wanted to apply for landscape architecture because I was thinking about how people moved through space. I was thinking about how exterior spaces change over the course of different seasons and times of day. I really love gardening. And so with that, I thought, well, in my final year, I should really create something that's sculptural if I'm hoping to get into landscape architecture, because I want to demonstrate how I can work with 3-dimensional space. These are just sketches, but the idea was, when I was a little girl, once again, I went back to personal stories, but when I was a little girl, I heard adults talking about how they didn't remember anything before the age of 12. And I thought, I was 6 years old at the time, and I thought, that's crazy. How can they not know? How can they not remember anything before the age of 12? That's my whole life. They don't remember anything from this. Like this, that's important. I thought, well, how come they can't remember anything before the age of 12? It must be that we have like boxes full of our memories, and that if you don't look in your box of memories often enough, you forget that you even have the box. And maybe if you haven't looked at your memories often enough, maybe you've forgotten a whole room full of memories, and that's how they can forget their whole childhood. So that was very concerning to me as a 6-year-old girl. So I decided to have memory cleaning days where I would sit and tell myself my stories. So I probably should have been listening in school, but instead, sometimes I was doing memory cleaning days and telling myself my stories. And so I actually did that as a little girl and as a teenager, and I still do that now. I tell myself my stories. And as a result, I actually do still have some memories from the end of 2 years old, beginning of 3 years old. And those are precious memories to me. So that's why I keep telling those stories. So I had this idea to create this physical manifestation of the mind and memories, and this space that's built up over years, and it's files are being sometimes organized, but also tossed in, piled in. It becomes cluttered. There's spaces that are blocked and lost, inaccessible, but maybe something happens and you can access them again. But it's just this huge accumulation of knowledge. And even if it doesn't seem like important knowledge, all of that is our own history, right? And those are all things that contribute to who we are, how we move through this world. Anyway, so I started making these sketches, and I presented them to the class. And one of my fellow students said to me, "Okay, so you're gonna make this?" And I said, "Yeah, this is what I'm gonna do." And the student said, "You've only done basically 2D mediums. What if you suck at making things?" I remember thinking, I didn't even think that was an option. I just thought, I'll just keep working until it's good. Like, what do you mean? What if I suck? It might suck, but then you just have to keep going. There's no other option. So I had no idea what I was going to make it out of, because I hadn't worked sculpturally. So I went to the bookstore at the school and just looked at what they had. And then I went to, Home Depot and looked at what they had, and started thinking, what are all the resources available and what can I make this out of? So I started buying paper products. And anyway, I'll just explain a little. I cut paper and foam core and cardboard, and just started making these things, and it took hours and endless hours. And I also had to hire an assistant. I say hire because I was a student and didn't have money. So the assistant I hired was my mother, and the pay was that we would work together, and I just had to put TV shows on the background that she enjoyed listening to. And that was the payment. So time spent together. And so I made little box patterns and would say, I need 20 of box number 3. I need 50 of box number 5. And I would be doing other things, and she would be cranking out these miniature boxes, and then I would take them and then fill the rooms and do stuff with it. And it was hours and hours and hours and hours of Canada's Worst Driver and Downton Abbey and things my mom liked watching in the background. But anything to keep the mind busy as you do monotonous work. But yeah, anyway, so I ended up making 5 rooms. I'm not showing them yet. I'm gonna wait for the big reveal. But I made 5 miniature rooms, and they all interconnected. And I knew that I wanted to have it so that this isn't the final work. This is an installation view. We're getting there. So just to clarify that, don't think, wow, she really screwed this one up. Anyway, so they had to be interconnected, and I wanted them to be hidden, because really, when you think about the mind, it's not accessible. You have to kind of discover it. And so I decided I wanted to have this paper shell covering the artwork, and then with little openings that you would go and you could look into and then see the miniature rooms. I was not able to make the final artwork until the final installation. So I had no idea if it would actually work. So the stress level was up to here. I had started this project in September and was now installing it in April, and didn't know if it would work. So, oh, I said there was 5 interconnected rooms. That was wrong. There's 6 interconnected rooms. Anyway, so I put them all on this platform, and I hung it from the ceiling. There's like a little metal pipe with the electrical running through there. And then you can see the underside of my platform has a few lights attached to it. And then on the top here, you can see I've got all these, you know, clamps clamping the rooms together. Then there's these lights that are all perfectly aligned. That's all that experience with photography and lighting that started coming into play. So I started working. Oh, here you can see the top view. There's just a schmozzle of cords and electrical. And here's my sister standing next to the work. I put some chicken wire, and here's my first piece of tracing paper going up. So I used tracing paper. It took me 8 days to install this work. And I was working 8 to 10 hours per day in those 8 days to get this done, frantically, not knowing if at the end of it, it would collapse. So I had this tracing paper. I used a total of 6, probably about 6 3-foot rolls and about 8 1-foot rolls. So I just kept buying more and more tracing paper, and I would pinch it and fold it and then tape it. And that stiffness of the tracing paper means it kept its form. And so you can see how it's kind of, there's a little bit of movement happening within the paper. So I kept working and working, and it kept evolving and evolving. And I kept thinking, I'm like 1 day away. I'm going to be so fast. And just kept needing more and more paper, and kept going and going and going until the end of 8 days, it was finished. And you can see there's these little gaps where you can look in and you can see the rooms. And it was 8 feet tall, and it's a little bit hard to see, but 6-foot diameter, and you can walk all around it. And one of the really lovely, surprising things about the paper is because it's so delicate, the room that the work was installed is next to the bus loop on campus. So when the buses go by, there's a low rumble that you don't even realize is happening, but the artwork responded to it and would quiver and would slightly go like, and it was like, oh, it's shivering. And it was like, it's alive. Oh, one of the exciting things about an artwork is when you've made something and afterwards it kind of takes on a life of its own and starts doing its own thing, and you just become surprised and also shocked at this thing that you've made, but it's also kind of emerged on its own. So that was a really lovely surprise. So when you walked into the room, at first it looked like this glowing, strange, swirling object. But then as you would get closer, you'd see that there were these tears in the shell and that you could look inside. And so here are some of, oh, I actually have a video. I forgot. Okay, where is this? Sorry, I'm not using my computer, so I'm a little bit, okay. Oh, here's a quick video. Oh, here's a quick video showing me installing a second one that I made for Dollarama. So this is in their corporate head office. So this, I thought the second time around it would go faster, but it also took 8 days. And the first few days are always spent on the ladder. So tiring. I mean, it's so physical. It doesn't look like it, but my goodness, by the end of the day, your feet are sore from the ladder, and you're afraid of falling onto the sculpture as you're leaning over it. And then just as a side note, when I was installing this artwork, they had said I could install it into the floor. But then when I got there, the owner of Dollarama said, no, we need to be able to move this. And I said, you didn't tell me that. I asked if I could screw it into the floor. So we had to change the base, and it was never meant to be lifted. And so they got that looks easy, that lift. Oh, that was stressful. It was never meant to be lifted. All the pieces were loose. The whole thing could have fallen apart, but it just was lifted and switched over to a new base. And yeah, it almost all collapsed at that point, but you can't see that in the video. Anyway, so, oh, and this artwork is the one that I won the BMO first, I have to get the wording right here, the National Prize for the Bank of Montreal's first art student competition. So anyway, yeah. See, you can almost see some of the paper settling a little bit as it's going. The video is almost done. And this one I didn't use tape, I used hot glue gun. Oh, now it's done. Okay. Okay, that's the next video. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the inside rooms. Oh. Okay, so here's one of the detail views. As you can see, the boxes that were made, there were many boxes. So within this little darkened space here, there were more boxes, and it's hard to see in the photograph, but there were these shadowy areas where memories and experiences were lost within a mind, but even those dark spaces were filled with things. So here's another room. And another one. And, you know, one of the things that was surprising to me as I made the artwork, so in this space, you can see that there's this shelving here on the side, on the left side, and then the shelf next to it has begun to topple over, and then the one next to that has completely fallen over, and all the boxes are in a pile. This was my first time making a miniature, and I was surprised how it actually transforms the viewer as they engage with the space, because I had a lot of people come up to me afterwards and say, oh no, your shelf collapsed. And I thought, well, isn't that funny? Because when they're looking in the space, they are so invested in that scene that they actually think the weight of those objects has collapsed the shelving. It actually took hours and hours and hours to carefully place things in a way so that it looked destroyed. But it became those details actually transport the viewer, and they feel as though they have witnessed something that has happened that hasn't been planned. And continues to be a really interesting aspect, I think, working with miniatures. So as you can see within this space, this is all cardboard and paper products. So that those craft techniques that I was starting to engage with, I continued to use, and it's just a utility knife, a ruler, and lots of hot glue gunning. So anyway, then I went, I did do a year of landscape architecture, as I mentioned. So I got in with this project, and then once again, story of my journey, I hated it. There was not a lot of planning exterior spaces and thinking about how people move through it. Instead, it was a lot of ditch drainage, and it hurt my heart. And I thought, I can't stay in here. I'm gonna lose it. So I immediately, by October of my first year of landscape architecture, I was applying to fine art programs again. I'm thinking, I've got to get in, because if I don't get in, I don't know what I'm gonna do, because I need to be in fine art. So thankfully, I did get in to the University of Guelph, which is where I was doing landscape architecture. So it was just a switch to a different building, but it was such a good switch. And when I went to fine art and started doing my master's, I started working with mirrors within the miniatures, and I took away the shell. And so there was no longer anything hiding the guts of my artwork. It was all exposed. And I was really worried at first that by taking away the shell, it would limit the miniatures. You could see exactly where they start, exactly where they end, and it would take away the magic. And so I realized very quickly I needed to include mirrors, because mirrors can shift and distort those spaces so that they begin to stretch out and move in ways beyond their shell or their physical layout. And yeah, this is the one of the first ones that I made that's completely uncovered. And so these are straight towers. There's 3 of them. And when you look into the top, the scene spreads out horizontally. So it's a little bit hard to explain. So I do have a video here, and it's just really quick. I won't show the whole thing. But there you can see the guts of the tower. There's the lighting. And then when you look up at the top, suddenly the image is stretching straight out. Whereas in reality, you're looking down into the tower. So you're looking down, but it looks like you're looking straight out. So one of the things, once again, watching the viewer, engaging with the artwork, people would look inside of them, and then they'd turn to look at the backside and they'd go, well, there's nothing there. And it's like, right, because you're looking in a mirror. But once again, being transported and the trickery was beginning to happen. And I would say, I mean, I do like a little bit of trickery. So, okay. Oh, I showed that. Okay, so here's one of the interior images. I started working with spaces that were, oh, I'm just going to move here in my notes. I started looking at spaces with like destruction, renewal, sites of tension. I wanted them to be spaces for viewers to project their own stories into the space. It was less. It's not the same university, but it's likely similar. Brenda, I think your mic is on.
Brenda, can you turn off your mic?
Oh yeah. Okay, we're good. Sorry. Anyway, so yeah, they were less about my own personal stories, and I was trying to open them up more a little bit and make them more accessible or open to interpretation in different ways. So once again, using simple materials. This one's a little bit hard to see. Oops. I'll just make this smaller. This one's all burnt, and so it's very, very dark, and it's actually just painted black, but I mean, a lot of people were like, oh no, that one burnt. It's destroyed. I wonder what it looked like before. And this one, I was starting to use more materials. So in here you can see that there's some crystals, and then I just bought sponge and then I painted it. And then this white stuff, I knew I needed something like a fine filament. So I actually cut the tips of my hair off and painted them white and just put them in there so that they have that plant-like growth. So starting to play with other materials. And then once I started playing with mirrors, I started thinking about, oh man, I need to talk faster. I'm almost done. Yeah, so when I started thinking about mirrors, I wanted to start playing with the meaning that you could even imbue with the direction of the mirrors. So in this piece, I wanted you to look down, so you can see over here there's an opening. I wanted you to be able to look down, but really, because the mirror is over here, you're looking up. So you're kind of descending, but you're ascending at the same time. So here you can see you kind of look down, and it's a bird's eye view from the top of a library. And as I don't know how dark or light it is on your screen, but at the very, very bottom of this bird's eye view of a library is a little table with a work light on it. And so you can see there's books and papers and all of these shelves are all kind of I never worked with any 90-degree angles on the walls. And so when I actually put this piece together, I became disoriented. I found it confusing, which for me helped me know that it was going to be successful for the viewer, because if I had spent hours and hours working on it, and yet I found it confusing to try and orientate myself within this space, then I knew the viewer would find that even more so. And I guess disorientation is a theme that starts popping up in these works a lot. So yeah, here's another quick one I'll just explain. So this one, it looks simple. It's against the wall. If you look in this doorway right here at the front, there's a mirror that means that you actually look all the way down this length. There's two mirrors over here. You look all the way down this back hallway, and then this is where your view ends. So I was making this artwork, and I knew I wanted to have it so that when you looked into it, it looked like you were looking straight through the wall. In this case, it looks like you're looking 12 feet through the wall. But I didn't know where to put the doorways, and I happened to have the movie Interstellar playing in the background as I was working, and they talked about black holes, and there was a visual. He talked about how if you take a piece of paper and you have maybe you should look at me for a second while I'm talking, if you can. Whoops. Oh, I guess I can show this too, but look at me while I'm talking. Okay, so he explained that if you have a hole on your paper over here and a hole over here, and you take that paper and you fold it in half, those two holes are touching. But if you move them apart, then there's this great distance. And I thought, like, he was explaining how black holes work. They're close but far apart. And I thought, oh, that's exactly what I want for this artwork. I want something where the doors are touching. They're so close together. But then when you look through the doorway, it's this huge distance. It's this long walk, and how maybe if you could walk to the end of that hallway, you would be transported somewhere else. Or maybe you would just be at the beginning, and it's this endless, almost prison going over and over and over, and kind of having that tension, that dichotomy, like, is there escape, or is this a progress that is actually leading nowhere, which can lead to larger discussions about, where we're at as a society. Anyway, okay. Just another one of those. This was a companion piece in response to that library where you look down. And I should say, with that library that you look down, it actually looked like you were looking through the floor. So some people who are afraid of heights actually felt like the floor suddenly was stable where they were standing. So I thought, I'm going to have one looking down and I'm going to have one looking up, but is actually looking down. So look up, but this is where you're looking. And so it's, once again, ascending, descending. It's this staircase, and there's this growth taking over the space. And it's unclear whether this growth is destroying the space or whether perhaps it's creating something new and beautiful, or like I said, or if it's a terror and just, yeah, nothing will exist at the end. I'm not going to talk that much about this work. Here's another work that I made. So I put a shell on a little bit. So this has 2 rooms within it. And then I started including some natural elements. So there's a tree. Once again, simple elements. I made that using Scotch-Brite pads, torn apart, dipped in paint and kind of fluffed up a little bit. I think I used 6 Scotch-Brite pads or something. Anyway, and here's an artwork that I made last summer, not this summer, but 2019. This has 5 interconnected rooms, and this is the biggest piece artwork I've made since the end of since that large paper shell project that I had made in my bachelor at the end of my bachelor's program. So for me, I'll just try and keep this as short as I can. I felt like this was a breakthrough for me because I had been struggling to make new work for a few years. I had actually been through 3 miscarriages, and the 3rd one was right as I was beginning to make this artwork. And it was difficult and draining, trying to come up with new work. But for the first time, I decided to put all of that energy and that sadness and those experiences into this artwork. Up until this point, I was trying to make work about other things. But the only thing that kept swirling around my head was all of this loss that I was experiencing with each pregnancy. And it was blocking my mind. I didn't feel invested in anything I was trying to produce. So, you know, once again, I looked to personal experiences, and it opened things up. I'll show you the rooms in this piece, and I know that I knew as I was creating it that most people wouldn't see any of those references at all. They would have other interpretations, and that was good because I knew that the work could be interpreted and engaged in with different ways. But by being able to put my own experiences in there, it helped open me up to create in a way that I was more engaged in. I didn't feel so restricted. So anyway, here's somebody looking into the work once again, just to show you how you can engage with it. And here are the rooms. So there's, once again, storage spaces, but I started including like tin cans of food. This is a detail most people didn't know, but I included. There's a picture of one of my ultrasounds in the background over here. There's different pictures of some of the reasons I was having trouble conceiving. A happy note to the story, I do have a baby. As I've mentioned, he was there before. So, but you know, at the time I didn't know what the future would bring. And I mean, we still don't know what the future will bring. But anyway, so that's one of the rooms. This room is just completely filled with refuse and garbage, and it's just building up and building up and building up. And I mean, yeah, there's still places of my life that look like this. Yeah, and I'm not going to explain everything, but yeah. So once again, this artwork utilizes mirrors. So all of the sculpture is just this square, but all of the rooms are intersecting and intermingling, and so none of it seems to when you first look in, it seems simple, but you realize I'm looking here, but I'm not looking here. I'm looking through another image. And I mean, that's one of those interesting things that I think, yeah, working with photography is, you know, there's a mirror in the camera that you're always looking. You think you're looking at something, but really you're looking at a mirror. All of these spaces, you're never actually seeing the scene. You're only looking at a reflection, and it's twisting and distorting you in different ways. And anyway, that's all I'm going to say. So questions. Thank you.
I just wanted to comment on the trickster approach. The idea is it's such an original approach to trompe l'oeil. You know, it's like the 3D, you've taken the 2D and pushed it into 3D and taken something that's very simplistic looking and chaotic looking, and had to be very controlling with it, you know, to actually create this. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong camera here. To actually create this work, this work that implies chaos, takes so much depth and is open to so many different interpretations.
And one of the interesting things is I'm making something 3D, then I'm restricting your view like you do with the camera. Yeah. I get to choose what view you get to see. Mm-hmm. And then because you're actually only looking at the mirror, you don't even get to see the 3D aspect. I'm flattening it, but it looks 3D.
Yeah.
But it's not. And so it's like this back and forth and back and forth. And I mean, that's not something I was thinking about when I was doing it. I think often as artists, you have these like impulses and you can't put words to it, but you know, someone will say, well, why are you doing that? And all you can say is, well, I must do it. I don't know why. And I mean, that's one of the things that schooling has helped, you know, what are you doing? Talk about your work. And then you feel like, I'm done talking, but it does help you reflect. And sometimes when you can identify those things, then you can go, oh, I want to push that farther, or maybe I should go the opposite direction because maybe there's opportunities there that, yeah.
So is it pulling you along?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody says, what is the name of the site? Sounds like Akimbo. And yes, Derek just said, yeah, it's Akimbo.
Mm-hmm. And well, it was very interesting to see the images and the work being built, and to see how you arrived at it. And pulling, like a magician is not, it's magic, and you're not supposed to share the magic, but by sharing it, you incredibly complicate the mystery of it. And
I didn't know that would happen.
Yeah. Oh, really?
If I didn't know that would happen. And if I'm being honest, in the master's program, they had said, you know, get rid of the shell. And I was like determined not to. And I tried doing something else and it failed miserably. And so I was like, that's it. This is what it is. This is what I'm presenting. And I mean, so that's also an encouragement. Sometimes what you think is a failure, if you put it out there anyway, suddenly, you know, in my bleary-eyed state of disappointment, I realized it was not a disappointment. It was actually better this way. Well, I shouldn't say better. There's new opportunities and new ways of playing and thinking and working. And so, yeah, but I do feel that, like, you know, that resistance when you sometimes feel like this was my vision, this was the way it was supposed to be. And sometimes, you know, you have to let that die. Sometimes you have to push forward, but there's also, it's that tricky balance of knowing when to let your vision die, because the artwork can do its own thing that is fascinating and exciting, and that then you can have that dance back and forth. Sometimes when you try to control it too much, it becomes tight and lifeless. And yeah, letting there be back and forth is really important.
And all this comes from the roots of those sketches, of those forgotten memories,
Yeah.
the very flat 2D pen and ink journaling, basically.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful evolution.
Yeah, and I should say sometimes the artwork, sometimes I know what I want the inside to look like first, and sometimes I know what the outside looks like first. And then I, like, sometimes I'll build the room, but I have no idea what's going inside of it.
Mhm.
And so, but I'll know like how I want the structure to look. So there's also back and forth and in those ways as well. Yeah. It's kind of
What struck me too is the size of the work. The work is so large for such a small view.
and I always have big ideas. I'm always like, oh, I want to do something huge. Like next time it'll be like 10 feet, and then I think, where am I? How do I get it out of the house? How do I store it? I can't afford like shipping it anywhere if I do that. But there's part of me that's always like, I think I would love to do, it's almost like I'm a kid and I want to build a fort. Like I want to build something that holds the whole body. Maybe it's that back and forth with landscape architecture. I want something where you're moving through it, but then at the same time, you're looking in a miniature space where you can't move through it. So yeah.
Well, heaven help us when you replace mirrors with a microscope lens or a telescope.
I hadn't thought of that. No.
Be afraid. Be very afraid. The images are haunting, though. They're different. They're not photographic. They haven't got this sense of flattening. There is this sense of what's there, what's next, what's hidden, what's not, what will happen. And again, that tension is very, very successful.
And I should say that the photographs are not taken as a single photograph, because when I tried to take photographs of the miniatures as a single photograph, it did flatten it and it looked small.
Okay.
But when you put your face up to the opening and look, the way our eyes work is we actually don't see everything at once. We feel like we do, but really our eyes are only focusing at one thing at a time, but it stitches it together in our minds. So we feel like we're seeing a whole scene. So I thought, okay, if that's how our eyes are seeing this, that's how I'm going to take the photos. So when I photograph the work, I take picture here, 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 and at the different depths. And then I stitch them together. So those images are kind of also a lie.
They're all altered.
Some of them are only like 3 or 5 pictures, but some of them are as many as 30 images put together and stitched. So sometimes you'll see one object that's blurry, and right next to something, it's completely sharp focus. And that's because it's
That's not the camera lens, that's you.
Well, it's all the images being put together, and it makes the image kind of stretch out in a way, the way our eyes look, rather than kind of, yeah. I'd have to show you the images side by side, but just believe me.
Yeah. Well, the process sounds like it's thrilling to you. It's obvious from your enthusiasm and passion that it's a thrilling process to actually arrive at the end product. But I tell you, coming from the outside, looking at what you've created and the various elements of it, it looks very scientific. It does not. It looks like it's very intentional. But again, there is a spontaneity to it that is absolutely delightful. I've never seen that before. So for me, it was very much an opening of a new window. So thank you for that. Were there any questions that were coming from the participants? Anybody waving your hand, or are we good? So I guess we will wrap that one up. You've already unshared your screen.
Yeah.
And my friends, it is time for us to go. I thank you all.
Oh, there's somebody waving.
Oh, there we go.
Or-
Angela.
Where is your work showing?
Well, where is it showing next? It is showing in Montreal. I think it starts in January. They're supposed to be picking up the work anytime, and fingers crossed. They said there might be an opportunity for a traveling exhibition. So I don't know where it would be traveling to. If it travels here, then look out. But it may also have a chance to travel to Europe. I'm really excited. That would be, that would be the first time a miniature gets to show in Europe. But if you want to be notified about any upcoming shows, I don't have Facebook. My website, like I said, I don't like computers, so I haven't updated it regularly. I need to do that. So shame on me. You guys should be better. You should make sure to do that. It's very important. I'm going to get to it. Anyway, but I included my email address. If you email me your email and say, like, I'd like to be notified when there's shows in Manitoba, then I'll add you to my mailing list and I'll let you know when there's a show, because that is the old school way I do things. So anyway.
So the email address there, for those of you who don't have the screen, is dueck@gmail.com.
And it's Erika, Erika. No C's.
Spell Dueck?
Dueck.
Pardon me?
Erika.
Dueck is Dueck. And then Erika, Erika @gmail.com.
Thank you.
Erika@gmail.com.
Okay. Erika, if you like to, if there are those who forget to get on that mailing list, if you are, if you would put MSA on your mailing list, then what we can do is, I have a list of the long list, people who've registered for the Juried show.
Okay.
And I'll just send out another email to everyone who was juried in this show.
Okay.
Or registered for the show.
Yeah.
So
well,
that's
you have my email address. Right?
I do. We'll send you the MSA address to add, so that we can hopefully that artists will have several avenues of continuing their contact with this kind of art.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much. Well, that brings us to the end of our juror lecture for the 88th annual Juried show. Thanks to all of you for taking the time to celebrate the opening today. At this point, we usually present the jurors with a book of MSA Directory of Artists. So virtually, we'll have to somehow get that to you at some point, along with their envelope of appreciation. So we'll be in touch with the jurors for that. Thank you all for attending. Thank you for registering for the show. Thank you for taking an interest in the show. I hope you enjoy the visit to the show. It's ongoing until December 31st. Again, it's at MSAOJCE.com. And we'll see you all for the next Juried show. I'll just leave this open if people want to visit and talk. So thank you to the jurors.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody be safe.
Yeah.